touches the need and anxiety of every individual that they have for themselves and for their loved ones because of our personal mortality and our vulnerability and the suffering that that can bring. So we want to know what health means and how to be healthy. And Barry helped us to develop a contemplative vision of health that incorporates sickness, suffering, and even death in a sense of wholeness. And this year, the exploration of unified consciousness will address, with a wonderful group of teachers and thinkers, will address the anxieties and fears that we have as, hopefully, we emerge from the worst of the pandemic. But even though we may be hopeful and relieved that the worst, at least for part of the world, is over, we are also wondering, with some anxiety, where do we go from here? Do we try to go back to the way things were 3 years ago? There's usually very little chance of going back in time. Or how do we see this crisis as the opportunity that it is to move forward on the human journey and to evolve? And one of the consequences of COVID has been to wake us up painfully to just how big a crisis humanity is in. So when the guiding board decided to adopt this theme of unified consciousness, there was a certain caution. Does this sound too abstract or intellectual? And it's why we explain what we mean by it with these words, one mind, one heart. And actually the Dalai Lama in that seminar a few weeks ago beautifully and brilliantly summed it up in the word warm-heartedness. So this question of unified consciousness, it's about the unification of mind and heart. And the degree to which we have reached this unity will determine many things about our life. Our happiness, our peace, our deep health, our sense of justice, and all that we mean by the good life. And you might say, well, there's not much sign of that around us at present. But the signs of disunity, of polarization, of the lack of justice, and incipient violence everywhere, they are all around. This disharmony and friction seems to have many causes, and we talk about them endlessly. The signs, however, are undeniable, both at the political level, the institutional level, and with the psychological symptoms of increasing mental illness and simple loneliness. There are other consequences which are creeping up on us more quietly, such as the invasion of virtual reality as a new kind of escape from the real world. Maybe this will replace drugs as our preferred alternative reality, but at a very high cost to human well-being and the human project. I haven't done it, but I was talking to somebody the other day who did. One of their children came back with a virtual reality headset costing a few €100 and put it on, and she found herself in a different universe. And it's used widely now in video games and training simulators, but it could be a preferred alternative reality. You step into the megaverse, not a universe, but a megaverse, and you hope that you move out of the pain of life and the human quest for meaning as a result. So we face many uncertainties. One of the main consequences of division and disunity is pain and suffering, and also a separation from the sources of authentic consolation and healing that should be around us, present to us. I learned as a child that when I stung myself on a stinging nettle, to look around, because always near stinging nettles there were dock leaves, and you would rub the dock leaf on your leg and it would begin to take away the pain of the stinging nettle. So these sources of consolation, the relief of pain and healing are all around us, but what if we feel separated from them? What if we've lost our awareness of the universe that we live in? The tragic dimension of life, of course, exists. It's there. And it involves pain and loss, which we're often not trained or educated to deal with. John Maine once said that the purpose of Christian education was to prepare us for the experience of betrayal. But how well are we prepared or preparing people today for the pain and loss that can be terrifying as we mature? And fear is one of the most divisive and corrosive of human states of consciousness, and it is rampant today. One of the practical effects of this series of reflections during this year on unified consciousness, I hope, is that it will awaken us to the antidote to fear and to a vaccination for despair. It's true, the tragic dimension of division and separation is part of our human journey. But in the wisdom of the great traditions, life is ultimately a comedy. It's a divine comedy, as Dante called it. It's not a bleak, fate-driven tragedy that ends up with just a pile of corpses. Comedies in literature end in marriages. They end happily in marriages, in unions, even though the players have had to pass through the fire and school of tragedy, although the emphasis was upon coming through the tragedy into the happy ending. But they had to experience, even in comedies, and in a humorous way, the crucifixion of their separate selves. One of the proposed questions for the reflection groups that will meet between these monthly sessions, and Leonardo will describe those later this evening. One of the proposed questions I'm suggesting will be, how do you feel about the future of the world? Not think, not plan, but how do you feel about the future? What do you feel the future of the world would be like? And around us, there is a high level of pessimism and doom. And perhaps it is true, as some have said, that we have a duty of optimism. That doesn't mean just putting a good face on it, but not a fake optimism that denies the tragic, but a hopefulness, the kind of hope that is born after our fantasies and our escapist addictions are exposed and disowned.